Heliot Emil is a brand that's been pretty popular on Instagram for a while now. If you're into fashion, you've definitely stumbled upon some of their offerings, like their liquid metal fabric or recently the fire that they set off during Paris Fashion Week. But as cool and innovative as Heliot Emil appear to be, none of it really translates outside of the Instagram bubble that they operate in. For the longest time, I just couldn't sell myself on the brand. Their clothes possess lots of qualities that I like: asymmetry, attention to detail, a muted color palette, and impressive textures. But the brand still never felt like it was as interesting as it came off through their creative runways and Instagram posts. There were some interesting pieces, but it always felt so derivative, which is fine to overlook for a newer brand, but it doesn't seem like they ever got out of that phase. Since I first stumbled upon them in 2019, I've developed my overall knowledge and taste in fashion a lot more. And so after reading interviews and analyzing all their collections and clothing, I've come to some conclusions about why I feel like I do towards it, and a lot of brands that follow the same formula as Heliot Emil. This is just going to be my opinion, so as objective as I try to be, in the end, it's fashion. It's a super subjective medium. I'm also not trying to act like I know what's best for the brand or for fashion. I like to deep dive into brands that interest me, and Heliot Emil interests me because I've never really loved it, even though it seems to be something that I should. So I wanted to rationalize my feelings towards it. Regardless of what I think, Heliot Emil is doing very well, and I'm just surprised about the lack of criticism I see towards it. Let's just get right into it and start with how the brand came to prominence, shall we? The brand was founded back in 2016 by the Danish brothers Julius and Victor Juul. It started off as a self-funded side project with around €5,000 put in to start. Julius acts as the designer and creative director of the brand, while Victor oversees the business and operations side of things. The brand was originally called Sons of William, which they quickly changed to the much cooler Heliot Emil, the name of their grandfather. I assume William was their dad's name. Real creative. Over time, the brand has flourished into a full-scale ready-to-wear brand, showing at Paris Fashion Week and with nearly 400,000 Instagram followers. Now, there are a couple things that I want to inspect about the brand, so let's first look at the image that it projects about itself, aka its marketing. Julius, the creative director, majored in communication and later worked in advertising at various fashion companies like Calvin Klein and Adidas. Victor studied business, so neither of the brothers have formal fashion educations, which is perfectly fine. But I think a lot of their success has come from their admittedly brilliant marketing, which is as important as the actual clothing that a brand puts out. To see Heliot Emil's amazing marketing in action, just look at their masterfully curated Instagram feed, which is an essential aspect for the success of any fashion brand. In this day and age, the main way that brands convey their ethos and lifestyle, also known as world building, is through social media. Obviously, the other main way of world building, other than the actual product, which is the clothes, is through fashion shows. But they've also become increasingly social media centric. So in the end, most of what people consume is through a very social media curated lens. Looking through Heliot Emil's social media will give you a general but accurate idea of what the brand is about without needing to get a closer look at the clothes. Monochromatic shades, subversive tailoring, lots of textures, and a variety of edgy photography styles that all mold together into the brand's aesthetic, which Julius describes as industrial elegance, which I think is a decent descriptor. The brand does come off quite stereotypically industrial feeling, but without most of the grit and roughness, leaving behind an idealized, elegant image. If you don't really keep up with fashion, then it's easy to stumble across this brand and be blown away by what you see just through their social media. They come across as this relatively experimental brand, pioneering this industrial elegance aesthetic of theirs. And I find that their aesthetic is well crafted to appeal to this type of fashion fan. The sleekness and lack of colors make the clothing relatively easy to understand and therefore accessible to a wider fashion audience. Yeah, they throw in some asymmetric pieces, some experimental styling, and through editing make it look like there's more textures than there actually is. But they can get away with that while still maintaining interest from a lot of people because it's like the only challenging ideas that they present, really. And if you look at the actual garments laid out flat on their website where you can buy them, you can see pretty typical silhouettes, nothing really that crazy or hard to wear. Just for funsies, why don't we compare Heliot Emil's Instagram with Rick Owens'? Heliot Emil's is very clean and visually pleasing, right? They show the products, they have little editorials around the place. As far as content goes, it's familiar, everything you'd expect from a fashion brand. With Rick Owens, first thing someone sees is a low-res picture of a chair. You do have some typical brand stuff like editorials and clothing shots, but Rick also treats this like his personal Instagram and shitposts whatever sometimes. It seems nitpicky, but there is nuance to this stuff. Brands put a lot of thought into their social media. It's all planned and it says a lot about the brand and who they're trying to reach. Rick gets away with shitposting because he's an established fashion celebrity that appeals to people that are really invested in fashion until he got popular with TikTok and then his audience grew a bit wider. If your main goal is growing a large following from scratch, Heliot Emil's approach will probably work better, unless the clothes speak for themselves, so you don't need to be fussed about your Instagram feed being perfect. Let me explain. There are a myriad of target audiences in fashion, right? But if we remove age, price points, practicality, and everything else, and only categorize people depending on how interested they are in fashion as an art form, so as self-expression, I'd say there are like 3 groups. People not interested in fashion at all. These people only wear clothes for practicality, really. That includes brands like Nike, Adidas, Levi's, ordinary, well-known brands. Then there are people mildly interested in how they appear and keeping up with fashion. Here I would include fast fashion brands like Zara and H&M, but also luxury brands like Louis Vuitton and Gucci. They differ in other categories, but for the most part, these brands appeal to the same people. They're very well known and produce relatively ordinary clothing that convey status of some kind, just at different price points. Then there are people who are really invested in fashion and the artfulness and creativity behind it. And brands that hit this target audience are the likes of Comme des Garçons, Maison Margiela, Rick Owens, etc. There is overlap. Brands go for different audiences with different things, and I'm sure you can get more specific. This is my own half empirical, half statistical observation, but I find that most people's main interest in fashion is in one of these categories, with most people in the first 2. Also, there's no wrong or right category. You're not better if you like Comme des Garçons instead of Louis Vuitton instead of Converse. It's merely a difference in interest and nothing else. So now if you look into brands with these various audiences, you'll notice various differences that identify what brands go for what audiences. All fashion brands invest in marketing, obviously, but some a lot more than others. Brands for people that are mildly interested in fashion tend to focus on marketing above everything else, because these people are not investing much time to understand the clothes that they wear. They want clothes that look normal and that other people consider cool or classy or whatever they're going for. So image is everything for these brands. While for people who are very interested in fashion, the clothes are the crux of the brand. Investigate this yourself. Y Project, a brand for hardcore fashion fans, are all about the clothes. All you'll get is the product shots on their Instagram for the most part. Louis Vuitton, I mean, have a look for yourself. Their posts are gridded out, tons of celebrities and stylized photos of people in their clothing. You'll notice 0 photos of their clothes on the actual runway, because really that's not that important to their audience. Do you see what I'm getting at now if we go back to Heliot Emil? With their emphasis on marketing and accessible clothing, they seem to fit more into the second category, rather than for people more invested in fashion, which might sound surprising, because they come off as a super unique dystopian brand all about innovation and pushing design into the future. They themselves say this in interviews and on their about page, but they offer subversive yet still relatively accessible clothing to a mildly interested fashion audience. This isn't a bad thing at all. There's no wrong target audience to have, but I don't think that they live up to the image that they present or think of themselves. On their brand's about page, they claim to be exploring the lines between form and function, driven by experimental approaches. And the rest of the page talks about how they carefully develop the aesthetic with custom fabrics, hardware trimmings, and materials. And designer Julius Jewell draws on thought-provoking themes and a curiosity about creative expression reflected in every collection by Heliot Emil, trademark. Okay, how about we finally look at the clothes and see this curiosity about creative expression in action. I won't scrutinize their early collections too much, but they started out making generic, edgy streetwear. This was when streetwear's reign was coming to an end, but rather than looking forward, I guess they started with what they saw around them, which is ironic because in an interview from Julius about the brand from April 2018, he says, "We're actually very fascinated by the amount of new brands that are out there at the moment. I think it's important to just stay focused on your own brand and try not to think so hard on separating yourself or on following trends. If you focus your energy entirely on what you feel is your brand, it will show in the product and people will be able to separate it from everything else." Funny he says that, huh? Staying focused on your own brand, when so much of Heliot Emil at this time was extremely derivative. Let's have a look. A bomber from their Spring-Summer 18 show. A Dries Van Noten bomber from Fall-Winter 14. This got pretty popular for them. Their contrast stitch ketamine graphic from Spring-Summer 18 as well. A Cold Walls contrast stitch polythene graphic from Fall-Winter 16. Is this Rick Owens? Yes, this is an exact copy of Rick Owens. Does this ring a bell to anyone? Raf Simons who? And their application of military and bondage motifs is extremely reminiscent of Helmut Lang. I mean, I said I wouldn't scrutinize their early collections, but this is basically my problem with their clothing from the conception of the brand to today. They're extremely derivative. Their clothes are not that experimental or creative, and paired with their marketing, it makes sense that they target people mildly interested in fashion, ripping off the work of designers better than them that have pioneered these styles, and then repackaging it as something new to a mildly interested fashion audience. Sounds like a profitable venture, but not much more than that. Not a creative or experimental one. I mean, even the name, Heliot Emil, Helmut Lang. You can't make this up, man. It's okay to reference these designers, but the way Heliot Emil does it is not constructively. It's like they just add more stuff and call it their style. Is that supposed to be innovation? And you never hear Julius mention referencing any designers either. Just how he presents himself in interviews bugs me. In the same interview as before, Julius said that he's inspired by the underground techno scene, industrial and brutalist constructions and process art in the conceptual thinking sense, but won't mention Helmut Lang or any other designer he's clearly grabbed from. I've never seen him mention anyone, and through his interviews he comes off a bit narcissistic. In an interview from 2022, when asked where do you start creating, he replied with, "It's important to stay agile, especially if you want to be innovative and if you want to be seen as someone who's at the forefront of what's happening." Like, obviously it's okay to be confident, but how do you say that without hearing yourself? I don't think Julius lacks total awareness. I feel like he knows what to say to appeal to his audience. He comes across as intentionally vague and non-specific a lot of the time. When asked about his target audience, he said, "We try not to dwell on targets because we think most people hate being put into boxes and being told what to like and why they should like it. It's not personal, it's simply statistics." If he was being honest, his target audience would be people who don't know much about fashion before 2005. That's when Helmut Lang retired. Everyone has a target audience, even if you're designing for someone like yourself, which I guess he later admits to. He was asked, or told this by the interviewer, Heliot Emil trademark is recognized worldwide for its avant-garde fashion and vision. But what does this recognition mean for you? You know, ideally I would not want to have an ego about what I do, but in the end I'm hoping to satisfy my own ego when I do something. You can read the rest of what he says, but to me this is just a super immature response, as wise as I think he thought it was. Maybe he really thinks he's on the forefront of what's happening in fashion. In that case, do you see much conversation in fashion talking about Heliot Emil, other than their liquid metal pants or their bags, which are the only unique things that I think they produce? Okay, back to the clothes. From spring-summer 19 onwards, they started moving away from streetwear a little bit. They still embrace where they came from, but yeah, they just started doing everything and applying their aesthetic to it. Anything out there that existed that had some overlap with Heliot Emil's aesthetic was prone to being molded and repackaged into their clothing. They're known for their harnesses, right? Harnesses were repopularized in 2019 by the likes of Virgil Abloh and Matthew Williams. And while they had dabbled with harnesses before then for sure, a lot of their harnesses and chest rigs are basically just what Prada did and has been doing since the 90s. They even wear Prada stuff instead of their own sometimes. Someone needs to tell them that adding a carabiner does not mean innovation. Alix, for their Fall/Winter 19 show, came out with a lot of bold, sleek leather looks. Alix being a brand that overlaps in aesthetic with Heliot Emil. Next season for Spring/Summer 20, Heliot Emil, a brand that's never had any leather at all before, except in a simple pair of pants, release full leather looks eerily reminiscent of Alix's, but with more crap, or as they call it, detailing all over it. Yes, let's look at their detailing. The biggest design trope of Heliot Emil is their detailing. All of their items basically follow the same formula of technically cutting a piece out here, adding a functionless zip and pocket there, put an absolutely pointless carabiner here, some straps, okay, let's do it again, rinse and repeat, baby. By doing this, you do get some inventive things. Statistically you will, but statistically it also makes for an extremely predictable, rudimentary design approach. Look at this, they put a carabiner on a Chelsea boot and call it a day. Is this for rock climbers? This is their standard briefcase bag. Why don't we add more briefcases onto the briefcase bag? Oh, and carabiners, of course. We gotta put carabiners on them. Oh, and you know these subversive basic looks that they started doing since Fall/Winter 19? It's basically just Shane Oliver for Helmut Lang Spring/Summer 18. Heliot Emil also copied a lot of Shane Oliver's subversive styling choices. These are all from 2017 and before. Heliot Emil uses Shane's styling to their advantage to, again, make their clothes look cooler than they really are. A lot of brands do this to disguise the mundanity of their clothes, but styling is not the same as designing. Bottega Veneta popularized rubber boots from their Fall/Winter 20 collection, which is the exact type of thing that fits into Heliot Emil's outerwear aesthetic. So of course they have to make their own rubber boot. Oh, but it's 3D printed, it's more sustainable. Ripping off other designers' work is unsustainable. The two counteract each other. They took Matthew Williams' signature look and put it on their runway. I hope I've made my point about Heliot Emil. The brand does not really design new things. They style existing things. Everything they do has been done and is being done better by others. We can finish with their most recent Fall/Winter 23 collection. They set this guy on fire, which has absolutely nothing to do with clothes or fashion or technology. It's just a gimmick to get attention on social media. That's it. My recent Patreon video was actually all about gimmicks in fashion if you want to learn more about what's been going on. And I mean, who was this impressive to other than 12-year-olds? A guy lit on fire, walking for 10 seconds or so? At least put him on like a motorbike or something, I don't know. Caperni did their spray-on dress, and literally next season, Heliot Emil and loads of other smaller brands wanted their own moment. And no, Ye was not the only one in history to set himself on fire, but it was a relatively recent stunt that he did, and I think that people accusing Heliot Emil of basically copying Ye, setting himself on fire, is fair, because I mean, they just didn't try to make it different at all, did they? Oh yeah, did you see this totally original hat they made for this collection too? Even their fans were pointing out how unoriginal it was, because what does this design have to do with Heliot Emil? It's black and white, which means they can integrate it into their universe. Look, this whole rant I've gone on about them copying can apply to a lot of brands really. A lot of fashion brands basically appropriate popular design, especially brands that go for the mildly interested fashion audience. These people are not interested in originality or integrity in what they wear. And even if they are, they're not interested to research the current fashion landscape and see what's going on. That's for little nerds in their room like me to do for you. I'm highlighting Heliot Emil because, as I said, I dislike their image. It's deceitful. Other brands in their audience don't go around claiming to be on the forefront of what's happening and being super experimental and innovative. That's not something you really say about yourself in any sense. Others should be saying it about you, but nobody is about Heliot Emil, so they say it about themselves to get it into their audience's head. And I feel like there are people who could potentially be more interested in fashion but got stuck at Heliot Emil thinking it was the pinnacle. Kind of happened to me. Heliot Emil was easily accessible through Instagram and seemed cooler than the bigger brands, so I gravitated towards them and others like them. But really, I was interested in the brands that Heliot Emil was inspired by. That's who I wanted to learn more about. And I think after I learned more about fashion, I naturally kind of forgot about Heliot Emil because no one ever really talked about them and what they were doing. They just kind of faded in with everybody else. I'm not saying that nobody should wear them. I pointed out their target audience, and that's perfectly okay. A lot of people just want clothes that look cool. I think that this mindset doesn't really lead to longevity in your closet. It leads to getting bored with your clothes much quicker, over-consuming, and not really developing your own taste. But that's just my silly little opinion. Do whatever you want. I made a video about finding personal style ages ago. Maybe the points there are still relevant. There's one last thing that I want to point out about Heliot Emil that also communicates their unoriginality to me. And this is one of the most important aspects about clothing that draws you in past how they look. They lack any sort of concept behind their brand. Remember I said at the start of the video that looking through their Instagram gives a quick idea of what the brand is about? Well, there is nothing else to know about the brand. It's all there. There is nothing deeper to Heliot Emil's aesthetic or messaging other than the semi-dystopian industrial aesthetic. Even though Julius says, I believe in creating a universe where everything aligns. The product is something that I can get tired of, but not the universe. I believe in creating a strong concept. People don't buy what you do. People buy why you do it. I mean, this just writes itself, huh? Julius agrees with me. But you've seen the clothes. Every season more or less blends into each other. It's funny he says he gets tired of the product, not the universe, when I feel like they should be one and the same almost. Each season you can read about the half-assed concept or main ideas of that season in some of their YouTube descriptions and through interviews. But I guarantee you will struggle to see many connections between the clothes and the concept. For Fall/Winter 20, the collection was called Amorphous Solid, which is the state between a liquid and a solid. And you can read what he says here to get a better idea, I guess. But the only way I see this represented in their collection is through their liquid metal pants, appropriately named. But really nothing else in this collection reflects the title. And Julius doesn't really explain much past saying the clothes are multifunctional, which again is a pretty weak connection. The show did utilize YouTube's 360-degree view feature, and you'll find that in a lot of Heliot Emil shows. They talk about how they use AI and pretty pointless tech, which to me all really comes off as gimmicks. Watch this, okay? Elements of this film was made using AI. Are you ready? See if you can figure out which part is made with AI, okay?
Wow!
Did you see it? Are you impressed? These gimmicks promote this narrative of innovation. Again, it's all down to their marketing. Brands that are all about image invest a lot of money into stuff like this. I'll use Louis Vuitton again as an example. Look at the grandiosity of their runways. It's insane. It projects prestige and wealth and demands applause. Look at Balenciaga's set design too. Now look at Y Projects. Even Rick Owens is pretty tame. He shows at the same location a lot. Set design can definitely be utilized in relation to the show and its message, but it's not really the main reason for why brands go crazy with it. Heliot Emil uses these gimmicks to project certain ideas about the brand that aren't reflected in the clothing. And if that's the case, then they really don't serve a function other than for attention. Just look at this show. They cut away every couple of seconds and give you no time to actually digest the clothing, because it's not about the clothing, it's about the universe. Their Spring/Summer 21 show is called Compos Menti, which means having full control of one's mind. And this collection was supposed to be an invitation to open up the conversation about our emotions. How sweet. I think the way that they conveyed that message was through this graphic of a guy looking sad. Oh, boo-hoo. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe this is too high octane for me. Can anyone else identify anything? Would be great if they had better show notes. They didn't even bother with show notes for their recent show. If anything, I think even their fans probably thought that they were dumb explanations, because the shows all merge into each other. That's how similar they are and how irrelevant the concept is. A lack of strong concept does not lead to exciting new ideas, because ideas really just conjure up out of nowhere in your brain. They're a combination of everything you've consumed. So usually, designers go about making new and exciting things by referencing new and exciting things that others haven't. A lot of work goes into the conception of a collection by exploring various ideas from different cultures and walks of life, by challenging your own perception of things. There's lots of ways to do it. Someone like Picasso, even a hugely influential artist, didn't just start painting cubism on a Sunday morning. He got there later in life by making but also exploring art, and was hugely influenced after he was exposed to African art. Look at the resemblance. Maybe that's a controversial example, my bad. But what I'm trying to express is that designing and creating new things takes a lot of time and effort and investment past sitting down and drawing an outfit. Even someone like Virgil Abloh, who a lot of people called unoriginal, would release pages and pages of show notes explaining his choices, which I greatly appreciate, and shows the effort put in. It doesn't mean the work is automatically good or appeals to me, but it shows that a lot of genuine work has been put in, and this collection will be worth looking at and analyzing, even if you end up not liking it. In the description of Rick Owens' shows, he has what feels like an authentic conversation about his thoughts behind the collection, and you can see all of the places that he goes to and references each season to try to develop his own way of thinking and how he expresses it. And by doing that consistently, he always makes great stuff. To be frank, the concept is the biggest influence on a collection. People can reference similar things. It's obviously going to be different from person to person. Everyone has a different creative lens, which you develop over time and by exposing yourself to new things, etc. But this combination of your creative lens and the ideas that you choose to invest in is how new great things are created consistently in fashion, in music, in art in general. The way Heliot Emil picks and researches into their concept is by choosing 2 long words and then just going on Pinterest and copying other designers that Julius thinks is cool. I mean, look at these titles: Amorphous Solid, Primal Substance, Solitary Uniform, Permanent Metamorphosis, Farting Butthole. It doesn't mean anything, it looks cool. That's all these titles are there for, to look cool. But they mean nothing beyond that. By not investing in a concept, where does Julius's ideas come from? They're not coming from nowhere. For the most part, to me, it appears to be coming from what he has consumed and put time into, which is just what's popular right now and what worked for other brands. This is why I think if you were trying to create something, you shouldn't just browse Pinterest and Instagram, because you're just going to see what everybody else sees. So it's less likely to be unique and also true to you. What you see and think of every single day becomes a part of you. Yeah, I think I've said all I have to say. This has been a long one. Before you comment, don't forget what I said about copying others in fashion. I know good artists copy, great artists steal. That's not a quote about art. That's a quote about marketing art. I can already imagine some people saying there's nothing new in fashion, but no, there's a lot of new stuff in fashion, a lot. There are more fashion designers than ever before, but that also means that there are more crappy designers too. There's more bad stuff and good stuff. I've made a load of videos on really creative designers that I adore for their clothes: Kiko Kostadanov, Y Project, Din Yun Jong, Schiaparelli, Peter Do, who in my opinion has a similar aesthetic to Heliot Emil, and while they're not my favorite brand, I can still appreciate that they are generally more inventive. I even think that Demna is a creative designer. My issues with him aren't really with his actual design, although he's become a bit repetitive of himself recently. Go look at all the designers that Heliot Emil copies that I mentioned in this video: Helmut Lang, Dries Van Noten, Rick Owens, Shane Oliver. Some other brands that do a better job honoring these people and just being more creative is High and So and Post Archive Faction. If you still like Heliot Emil, that's perfectly okay, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you agree or disagree with me. I'm open to any criticism. I'm not claiming to know it all, but I did try to research everything that I could to form my opinion. I made a TikTok on Heliot Emil nearly a year ago, and my thoughts weren't that clear that time, so I have been ruminating on the brand for quite a while. I've released a couple of Patreon videos since my last YouTube video. I went more into fabrics and also talked about basic garment construction if you really want to know more about the clothes that you're buying. And as I said, I made another video talking about the surge in gimmicks in fashion recently and how I want to perceive them. Yeah, final thoughts. Heliot Emil, big fan. Shiny metal pants, so cool, so cool.